A good afternoon, video viewers. This is a video about lawsuit guitars, and I'm doing this for business English on my study. So I'm gonna use some visuals here. It's just a PowerPoint on an external monitor because I have to use visuals. First thing I want to talk about is the name lawsuit. Not everyone's probably familiar with lawsuit guitars and what they actually are. So, come on, PowerPoint, just work. I hate visuals. Yes, works. So, lawsuit guitars, what are they? The name comes from the 70s when a lot of Japanese brands, guitar brands, were making copies of American guitars like Gibsons, Gretsches, whatever. Gretsch isn't even American, I think. No. Gibson didn't like that because in the 70s they were also copying the headstocks. I've got a lawsuit guitar here, what they call a lawsuit guitar. This is an Ibanez Les Paul from 76, so it's 37 years old, and it has this headstock. It's not the Gibson one, as you may know, because in 74 or 75 Gibson sent messages to all Japanese brands who were making these copies to ask them to stop with building exact copies of the Gibson headstocks, and if they wouldn't stop using that headstock, they would start a lawsuit. So that's where the name lawsuit guitars come from. A lot of people think there were like lawsuits against brands everywhere between Gibson, Fender, and all the Japanese brands, but it wasn't. There has never been even one lawsuit. There just has been a few letters saying if you don't change the headstock, there will be a lawsuit. So don't let you tell someone there were all lawsuits. It isn't. No, there weren't. Yes, well, so a lot of Japanese brands started in the late 50s building guitars, and they made pretty much only made copies. There are like not really much Japanese brands who made their own guitars, but Japanese are known for their copycat things. So in the late 50s they started building these copies of American guitars. First just the body, you know, like we make guitars and they are cheaper than the American, and that's cool, okay, and Gibson was okay with that. But in the 70s they made like, you couldn't see the difference between a Gibson or a Fender, not between a Gibson and a Fender, but you couldn't see the difference between a Gibson and a Japanese Les Paul copy, or between a Fender and a Japanese Stratocaster copy. There was just pretty much no difference. The Japanese brands even set Fender on the headstock if they build a Fender copy, or Gibson if they build a Gibson copy. So there are still, these guitars are still few on the market. They are pretty much expensive because, not because they are particularly very great, because they are pretty seldom. So that's why. I lost my story. Just a sec. Why were the Japanese guitars pretty much cheaper than the American? Well, as you can see, this one is looking pretty much exactly the same as a Gibson Les Paul, except for the headstock, because it's from 76, and in 75 the Gibson headstock copies were forbidden. The difference is the Japanese brands built their guitars not totally by hand. They, you know, the body was made with a machine. The headstock was made with a machine only. They assembled it by hand. So at the end, you wouldn't see very much difference in quality. This one sounds. I've tried like I think 30 Gibsons or something like that, and I never had one in my hands that's better than this. And this has cost me 400 euros second-handed from eBay. Yes. And I think if you would buy a Gibson with the same quality, it would cost you around 2,500 euros. So Second hand maybe 1500, but okay. So it's really cheap compared to original Gibsons or Fenders if you have a Fender copy. The quality difference is mostly in the way they finish it, because they assemble it by hand, but because it's made by machines, it won't fit exactly perfect everywhere. As you can see here you can really see it on video. It doesn't just really fit the way you would see with a Gibson. Does it matter? No, it sounds awfully great. This is really like my, except for I have a Fender Telecaster, this is my second most used guitar. I play this like all the time. But the pickups of the guitar are just as good as on the Gibson. So the difference in quality is really in the way they finish it. You should also watch out for other Japanese brands, because not every Japanese brand make good guitars. There are like supermarket brands who make guitars because they thought there was, they could make money there. Also Pearl, famous from the drum kits, they also make guitars in Japan, and they are also not really good. But most of the Ibanez guitars, Tokai, Takamine, Bernie, Fernandez, they are pretty good. But you should also try out before you buy one, because this one is 37 years old. They won't all be perfect. But in common, they are pretty good for the money you pay for it. Let's see. Whoa, I swapped one. Difference between Japanese and American guitars. Yeah, well, that's just what I talked about. I'm too fast for my visuals. Cons versus Pro. It's just what you're looking for in a guitar. I mean, if I had 3,000 euros, I would spend it on a Gibson, definitely. But I don't have 3,000 euros, so I look for a guitar that's equal as good as a Gibson, and for which I pay pretty much nothing compared to that. So I bought this one for 400, and it's just as great as a Gibson. The bad thing about Gibson is they used to make really only good guitars, but now they made like you can buy a Gibson for 550 euros, and it's just a really crappy guitar. You shouldn't buy it. So then you better spend your 550 euros on a Ibanez copy guitar, and yeah, you don't have the Gibson emblem on the headstock, whatever. So that's what you choose for. If you have the money, buy a Gibson. If you don't have it, you can also buy a cheap Gibson, but you probably rather buy an old copy. So this was my presentation. Thank you very much for watching. I still hate the visuals. Thank you for letting me using them. Bye bye.